Hey, everybody, Kevin here again with another episode for you of the Real Estate Without Renters podcast. And thank you, as always, for listening to the show. And please, if you enjoy it, give me a nice rating there and go ahead and subscribe as well. I really do appreciate that. And hey, if you're at any real estate meetups, investment meetups, anything like that, and you can share the show, I would certainly appreciate that as well. For my regular listeners, I've been doing a series now for an event that's coming up, and I saw a lot of impressive speakers coming up at this event, and that includes today's guest, which I know you're going to be very impressed with. But the event that I'm talking about is the Re-Up event. It's going to be up in Columbia, South Carolina, July 29th and 30th up in Columbia. And great lineup there. You can learn more about it at reupmeetup.com. That's REUP meetup.com, and go there and you can see all of the various speakers, all the topics, everything. And I'm really looking forward to being up there at this event. It looks just super good. So I thought it'd be a great idea to interview as many as the speakers as I possibly could for you. And by the way, if you're interested in attending that, you can enter a promo code NOTES, 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 and you'll get 20% off the price there. And of course, I'll be up there as well. I plan on being there the entire time, so make sure you come and say hello. So I want to introduce you to my guest here. Very impressive. Just too many numbers to go through, but I want to hit some highlights here. I think it's extremely important here. First of all, starting with 10 years in the military service, 8 as a Green Beret, very impressive. And then taking those skill sets of team management and growth and just energy around that whole thing, the whole military concept, and applying it to business is quite impressive. And been able to build up 130 rental doors in 28 different markets. He also has over 100 agents that cooperate and co-own teams, and has really built a very impressive organization. And he's also now taken all of that and started to focus on the financial and business side of real estate investing. And I found that pretty darn intriguing. You don't hear enough about that part of the business. And we are in one of those industries, which is it a business or is it investment? I guess you would say the answer is both. So everybody welcome Michael Glaspie. Michael, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, do you run into that too? It's like, are we investors or are we business people when we're investing in real estate? So I focused on notes. I know you're focusing on residential real estate, but also commercial. Of course, you're a commercial broker and active in that market as well. So you're on the bricks and sticks side, and I'm kind of on the note side. But I still run into that. Are we investors or are we in business? And it's both. And what's your experience been in that and your focus now?
Yeah, 100% correct. It's both. The answer is both. And so oftentimes we get this idea of being investors as this extremely passive thing where we do nothing and this money just appears out of nowhere, when in reality, everything that we do, the processes were screening if this is going to be the next note that I'm going to actually invest in. Screening is the property, okay, the clients that we're dealing with, so forth and so on. That's a system. And if those are systems, then this is a business. Right. Mm-hmm. And so understanding that investing may be our niche of choice, but we must operate it as a business.
Yeah. And as systems, I like that approach to everything. And the system that you have built, when you were starting out, did you stumble into a system and kind of learn by trial and error, or did you educate yourself? Did somebody take you under their wing? And how did you develop this system and time frame in which to do something like that?
Yeah, and a lot of it was a mix of all the above. So I had been, traditionally trained through a college education. I have my bachelor's in business. They teach you just the bare bones, right? Just the bare bones. As we were growing, a lot of it was trial and error. Now, luckily for the agency side of the house, I did have a partner. On the investing side, it just started off as myself. And I would go and ask everybody who's walked the path before me, and I would just try to pick everybody's ear. Just, hey, what did you do in this situation? What's the one thing that you would share to me that you think would be beneficial to know in the beginning? And kind of compiled all of that over the years, and then created something that fits my personality, my work schedule, my work-life balance, if you will, right? We can talk about that a little bit later on. And then started refining it along the way and understanding that this is a forever path of progress. This is never going to be cemented in stone that this is the one and only system. There's always areas for improvement as I move forward.
Yeah, and it's a dynamic market, right? I mean, we're
Absolutely.
constantly changing, and the things that worked a couple of years ago may not work next year or this
Exactly.
year, and so yeah, you're always reevaluating where you are in the marketplace. But I thought because you offered, you do offer personal consulting and things like that, and I think
Yeah.
that personal touch. It's really hard to beat, when you've got somebody there with more experience. I mean, that's how I think you accelerate your learning, and you can build these systems faster without taking the hits, and it's one of those things where if you get into real estate or real estate notes or both, the mistakes can add up quick, and that can discourage you or make you completely leave the industry. And it's so important to connect with other people in the business, and I like that aspect of it. What did you draw a lot of that from the military? I mean, that had to have a tremendous. I mean, you're at elite level there. I mean, that had to have a tremendous influence on everything you did since, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I was always fascinated with business, even as a kid, and I didn't know it at the time, but I mean, I was selling candy, selling Pokemon cards, all these things as a kid. And even in high school, I had joined, there's this program called Distributive Education Clubs of America. It's called DECA, and it's a business program within the high schools, and it's still around today. But it taught me essentially the fundamentals of business, how to create a business plan, how to market, all of these things. And that's really where I started to see that business is a mix of passion and creativity. Right. So once that really kind of accelerated, I did join the military. And then I started realizing, especially in that field that I was in as a Green Beret and Special Forces, we have a lot of autonomy. Now, we still have to, operate underneath Uncle Sam. So there's still our left and right limits, but we have a lot of autonomy of how we get things complete. And so, again, that goes back to how resourceful we are and how creative we are. And all of that, over the years, just kind of built up on itself. And as I transitioned out, I was able to take a lot of the systems that the military follows and finally coming to the understanding that the business is truly an enterprise. It is a company, right? It really is just a very large business, and taking those small lessons learned and then just applying it to everything else moving forward. And it's almost as if, the wool was kind of pulled back or the veil was pulled back, and I could see clearly like, oh, this makes sense. We've been operating like this for over a decade. Well, the military's been doing it for over 300 years. This makes sense.
Right. And I'm imagining, and please let me know the starting out. So, to get up to a point of 130 rentals, I don't know what time frame you did that in. You can tell us, but it looks like it was rather quick. Did you start with one deal, limit your exposure, get through a transaction and build upon that? Is that how you got to this level now?
Yeah, it started off when so the first house I ever got, I was house hacking without even understanding what house hacking was. I ended up going to one of the real estate, weekend seminars, and, the gentleman on stage said, the easiest way to get into real estate is by house hacking. And for the audience, if you're not aware of house hacking, it's where you live in it and then you're renting out the other bedrooms or other spaces to your friends or other roommates. And I was doing that, I was a single soldier at the time. As soon as he said that, I was like, oh, I'm a real estate investor. Yeah. And then from there, it just all kind of, I'm not going to say downhill, but that's when I just decided to just accelerate rapidly. So I started doing wholesales, all types of creative deals. As a matter of fact, my first real investment property was done through a subject to, right? Not even a conventional loan. I used the VA loan several times for live-in flips, for triplex, duplex house hacking. And it just kind of kept going and going and going. And the more creative I got, the more I acquired. Now, with that being said, hindsight being 2020, I do think that I went a little bit faster than I should have, right? And just recently, I actually sold over half of my portfolio and actually increased my profitability, which we could talk about here in a second. But understanding that, that was all a great learning point for me. I really understood the acquisition side very well. And then when you get to the portfolio management or the asset management side of the house, really understanding what levers play to the bottom lines that are important to you. All of that exposure I got fairly quickly as I continue to grow.
So what do you mean? You feel in hindsight you grew a little too fast, got a little too thin, couldn't manage everything, and you said, "Hey, I got to peel this back a little bit and focus on what's really making the money out of the business."
100% right. Yeah. So the 80-20 principle is something that is just tried and true throughout the years. And I realized that 20% of my portfolio was producing 80% of the profits. And at the time, what I was doing, which I find most of my clients do, and most real estate investors do, is when you're investing in whether it's notes or it's actual real assets, real property, you're only looking at it from deal to deal. Oh, this deal is going to be profitable. This deal will give me a 12% return. This deal should give me a 20% return. And in reality, what we're forgetting is the actual operational overhead of the company. What systems are we using? What salaries are we paying? What's our marketing campaign, whatever the case is. And at the end of the day, once you start to kind of line it all out, and I share this, and I'm going to share this at the re-up event as well, but one of my clients did 40 flips the previous year. Then the following year, they brought me on, and within about 2 months, I actually showed them, you guys completed somewhere around 40 flips, and you lost $90,000.
Wow.
It's like, how does that happen? It's because the oversight of the overhead of the actual company becomes, almost invisible because we're only looking deal to deal. And I found that I had did the same thing in the beginning when I scaled so quickly. I was just looking at the individual property, not the overall portfolio.
Yeah, the overall picture. Yeah. Does that tie into your 3 numbers that determine success in your business?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so when we look at that, a lot of times, dollars will lie, but margins necessarily won't. Right. And so a dollar, and it kind of to that point there, the revenue is great. We're making a lot of money, so-called on paper. But, I always ask the question, if you made $1 million this year, would that be a good year? Most people say yes. All right. Well, if you had to spend $1 million to make exactly $1 million, is it still a good year? It's like, no, I'll walk away with 0. Exactly. Right. Numbers can lie. We have to look at the relation of how that money is being spent and earned.
Yeah, we have in the note side of the business, one of the numbers we always talk about, especially on the performing note side, is to your point, it's yield. And the way the industry does it, and I can argue either side, is basically how much money you're paying for this note and what's it going to pay you back on a monthly basis in cash flow, and calculate that yield, use time value money, that sort of thing. And that's how the industry does it. But the reality is every note that we buy, we typically service. And there's a cost with the servicing.
Yep.
And I was looking just yesterday, I do the personal consulting with the client. And since it was a smaller note and it was only 50 payments, it was something like a 15% yield if he bought it for the price that he had offered. But when you add in this $45 a month servicing cost that it had to it, it dropped him down to about 7%. I mean, it just cut it in half, So to your point, as an investor, you look at what overall, but what is all that extra cost that you have? And of course, on the brick and mortar side, you have a lot more to that than we may have on the note side for what those costs are anticipated and unexpected that you have on those things. But I think you're exactly right on that. And a lot of investors who are just an investment themselves, like where you first started, they don't have that overhead of employees or independent contractors. When did you start to envelop that into your plan? Did you start them as partners, or did you bring people in as paid employees, or how did that go?
Yeah, we brought in people pretty quickly. And so I'm a firm believer of leverage. I look at it in a couple of different ways. One, I believe in leveraging out your weaknesses. So, for example, I'm not a tech savvy guy. I'm getting better, but I'm not a tech savvy guy. So I have to bring somebody in to really run that side of the company. And that can be a virtual assistant, or maybe that could just be the support program for the CRM. But whatever the case is, we're leveraging that out. The second piece to it all is once we really identified our workflow and basically what that streamlined process looks like from start to finish, we try to automate as much of that workflow as possible. And that could be through our integrations with Zapier, whatever the case is. Then what we could not automate, we would then start to hire out. And so we would bring in full-time. And for the agency side of the house, this is a very simplistic model where the first thing that we wanted to do was bring in people for our transaction coordination, meaning once the agent's got it under contract, we need to get that all the way to close. Our agents are our sales reps. You just keep going out there and selling. Let our TCs handle everything from contract to close. And so that was one of the first positions we filled. Then we brought in listing coordinators. Then we brought in somebody from marketing. And now obviously that's fluctuated here and there. And we realized that not everybody has to be full-time salary. We can always bring in fractional or virtual part-time assistants to still meet the same objective. But I'm still at this point, I'm a very firm believer in that. And I help my clients see where in their workflow should they automate or should they hire from a financial perspective as well.
So all of this you're monitoring under these three numbers, and I just want to circle back to that. What do you think are the most important, the three numbers that you mentioned for the business finance and such?
Yeah, the three main numbers is how much you make, how much you spend, and how much you keep. All right. And so with that being said, make would be our revenue, our income. Oftentimes we focus way too much on that. And if you think about it, most of the coaching programs out there, most of the things that are, hey, if you're an entrepreneur, come and hire me, teaches you how to increase your revenue, how to get more sales, right? And that's fine, but that's one part of it. Now, on the spending side of the house, what we have as human nature is we have a lifestyle creep, right? And so what this means is the more money we make, oftentimes we spend more money. This is actually based off of a law, a principle called the Parkinson's law. And essentially what that means is the more of it we have, the more we tend to use. One of the best examples for this is everybody's driven down that one single lane highway before, and it's like, man, this traffic is horrendous. The city comes in and they build it out to a 2-lane or a 3-lane. And then what happens? The traffic is horrendous, right? Because if we have more space, we're going to use it. And we do that same thing there. And so with our spending habits, because we don't often really keep control over it, as we grow, that just seems to get out of control as well. And then arguably the most important is the keep. Okay, now the keep side of it is exactly how much you keep after taxes, so forth and so on. And most people are concerned with that. They don't really care about making the million. They want to keep the million. And so understanding that those three numbers are the important things you must focus on, the question then just becomes, how am I reading these within my financials? Because it's not just on the income statement. It's not just on the balance statement, right? It's a mix of all of these. And we kind of alluded to it earlier. It's also the efficiency of how much you keep versus how much you make, which goes back to those margins. But as simplest as we can break it down, those are the three numbers that we really want to focus on as business owners.
So those are the three numbers. And then part of what you touched on at the end there was the efficiency, which has to spell into lifestyle. Again, you mentioned earlier about your lifestyle. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So when we look at everything, and just to make sure I understand the question there, you're talking about the lifestyle creep section?
Yeah. You had mentioned something about the lifestyle and how your work, how you schedule your time to work and things like that. I imagine that has a lot to do with efficiency. As to what you say, where those numbers are.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we oftentimes as the entrepreneurs, we like to be the chief everything officer, right? CEO, and we wear the hat for everything. And there is oftentimes there's a little ego involved with it, along with the little ignorance. And I don't say that in a belittling way. It's just what we don't know, we don't know. And so we come in and we think in order to do something right, we must do it. What we end up finding ourselves doing is, we're spending 4 or 5 hours a week working on SOP development or working on the way that this spreadsheet looks, right? Or something like that. When in reality, none of that is producing you income. And your specific skill set, when we rewind it back, you leverage out your weaknesses, focus on your strengths. Your specific skill set in this example is going out there and closing deals. Well, you should be going out there and closing deals and leveraging off this other stuff, to get done by somebody else. And so by optimizing efficiency of time, we look at that in every aspect of the business to see where we can optimize efficiency of the dollar.
Yeah. Oh man, you're hitting guilty. Guilty. And that's, I'm going through part of that right now where I'm just like, I shouldn't be focusing on this, but I had that mentality of, but I can get it done another way I want it, so I think there is definitely a part of that where you just go, I need to start to be able to outsource that and trust that and focus on the most important aspects. But I think everybody gets to that point, you just, what do you do? You got to start outsourcing. You got to start doing that the right way. And gosh, you hit the nail on the head there. So I got a bunch of thoughts going through my head on that. But that's, to me, that all comes down to that efficiency and lifestyle and all, because I don't think any of us get into this to work 24/7. At some point you have to kind of go, well, what am I doing all this for again? And I remember years ago, someone said, to be wealthy is to do what you want to do when you want to do it with the attitude to enjoy it.
Oh, I like that.
Good one, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that means, all these things we do, your path in real estate provides, passive income, if you will, active to get it, but you know what I'm saying. And on the note side, the same kind of thing. So I think that ties into business plan too. And I note on your website there, which is Michael Glaspie, by the way. So Glaspie is the website. You can check him out there. The 6 C's of resilient business plan. Can you kind of highlight some of that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So with business planning, there's several different aspects that we need to think about. Now, oftentimes, if we look at a traditional business plan, it's going to have a lot of the things in there as far as like market analysis and what is your strategy for growth and things of that nature. When we really break it down to what we need to understand within a business, it can be broken down into something a lot more simple. And so the 6 C's is kind of that measure of simplicity. One of the things that kind of sits in there is competence, as an example, right? You have to understand where you're competent at to understand where you're confident at. And a lot of times, here, I'll give you an example. People will say, you know what? I know there's got to be a market for gas stations where people pump the gas for you because, it's just so annoying to me. I hate doing that. I'd rather have somebody do it for me. Great. That's a great idea for you. Okay. Now, 1, we got to see if the market wants it. And 2, how competent are you inside the gas industry, the retail space, right? Anything along that sector. If you're not, well, how can you be confident when you go to sell that product, right? And so understanding where you're competent, a lot of competence may come from experience. Yes. But a lot of competence comes from drive and passion and your ability to be, I call it like, being an autodidact, I don't call it that, but like researching and becoming obsessed with it. Mm-hmm. If you're really into it and you can find the answer, somebody you can call to find the answer, that's going to build up a lot of confidence. Now you can go out there, and when you set up a business plan, remember that all we have to do to be able to sell a product is solve a problem. And in order to solve a problem, we just need to be 1 chapter ahead in the book. A lot of people come in and say, I can't start real estate. I can't start note investing. I've never done it. I don't know anybody who's done it. All right, great. Research it. And as soon as you know this is how you set up a note investing business, well, now you can teach others how to set up the business. Mm-hmm. That's the first step. And then as you learn, you can teach the next chapter in the book and the next chapter in the book. Mm-hmm. But understanding that competence is a big piece in that.
Yeah, and you're right. It comes back to what we said earlier. It comes through experience. Well, how do you get experience if you don't have it? Well, either through trial and error, which again can be costly to the point where you just get discouraged and leave, or you start surrounding yourself with people who have the experience and you learn through the experience of other people. I mean, there's really the 2 ways if you break it down, at least in my mind.
Right. Exactly. 100%. 100%.
So competence. And then, I'm sorry, what was the other? So you said the 6 C's. So you got competence.
Yes. So 60, you got competent that leads into confidence. Mm-hmm. All right. Building your proper community. Right? How do you enjoy to contribute? This is the next one, contribution. Character, what's your natural character? And then control, understanding what you can and cannot control. Mm-hmm. All right. And that's the basic, the simplicity of it. Each one of those feed into each other. And once you break down those 6 C's and now it's more of an internal observation of yourself, you then can go out and design your business plan accordingly. And that's the basis of really understanding those 6 C's.
Yeah. And how important do you think it is for somebody to have a written plan?
Extremely important. The written plan isn't so like you memorize it or, you have to pull it out when you read it. The written plan is so that you have something to fall back to when you start to forget, or if you start to get caught by the shiny object syndrome, which we all do, you can go back and say, what was the actual plan? And when you write out a plan, when we align it correctly with our personal goals and make sure the business goals are aligned correctly, that makes sure that we stay on track. But to just go back to the conversation when I talked about my clients doing over 40 flips and they lost 90,000. Well, when I asked them, what happened, they were saying, look, we started this entire business as an means to an end. We just want our rental company or our properties to produce passive income so we can just live the lifestyle we want. And what they ended up doing was they started chasing flips. And they were doing flips any way they could, wraparound mortgages, subject to lease options, rent to own. They did not care. They just wanted more flips because they saw the paycheck behind it.
Right.
And before they knew it, all of that money that they so-called made, all they kept doing was rolling money back over into flips and not putting them into those rental properties like they wanted. And so they lost sight of their original reason why they started that goal. So to your point, by writing out this business plan and making sure that the goals are aligned, it's okay to go back every 6 months or every quarter and check in. That's perfectly fine. But having it allows you to have that guiding path, you know, kind of set in stone. Is this the right option or am I falling off track?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. It brings me back to years and years ago, because thankfully early on, somewhere along the line, you know, I wrote things down. I had a plan, had an agenda, and not quite sure I even remember where I learned to do it that way. It might have been just more simple for me to have something to go back to. But as you have, I got like 5 notepads sitting right here on my desk. I still do a lot of those and transfer to the computer. But I was talking with somebody and they were starting this business, and then I said, okay, well, what about this? What about that? And they said, you know, they're like, it's all up here. It's all up here. I said, well, you know, where's your business plan? Right here, man. It's all up here. I said, well, it should be easy to write a business plan. If it's all up there, write a business plan. And when they had to start getting to, well, how much money are you making to, you know, coming back to what you were saying there, after your expenses and this and that, where are you? And they couldn't complete the business plan. They couldn't put it in writing because the software that I told them to use to write this plan was asking questions they didn't have the answers to. And I said, there you go. That's why you got to go back and figure this stuff out. And especially for those who are listening and are new to notes or real property, whatever direction you're looking at doing, you absolutely have to spend time on that. When I take on a new client, the first thing is not talking about a deal. It's tell me about you. Tell me what you want to accomplish. You know, where are we starting from? How much time and effort do you have to dedicate to this? You know, what kind of capital you're looking to, what's your risk tolerance? You know, what all these different things to try to get an idea of the right direction to start with. Because I'm sure you'd agree there's long-term goals that are part of the plan. There's short-term goals that are part of the plan. And you need that little momentum to get going. And I'm telling you, something about putting in writing brings it into the real world. You know, it is something you can go back and look at. And, you know, I go back to the days where you'd have it written and you kept it in your wallet. You know, you have to take it out every once in a while and go, remember why you're working a regular job and then going out and looking at properties or, you know, something later on. It's like, this is why, you know, but it keeps you motivated and keeps you on track, because I think if people just have it in their own mind, it's just out there, you know, and it's so easy to drift off to, you know, to other things. But so if you're listening, put these things in writing and think about what he was saying there. So what do you think about what's going on with the economy in the future? I know it's been a topic that a lot of people have been talking about and how it's going to affect real estate. I realize real estate's all local, you know. I think everybody thinks that way, but when we look on a national basis, where do you think things are going, and are you doing anything differently to prepare for that?
Yeah, I love this question because honestly, none of us really know what direction it is. But, you know, depending on what we look into at the time, we all have different perspectives. And so for me, what I've been watching is all of the trends. You know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any means, but when we look at trends, there's certain patterns that follow with it. When large hedge funds start to put money into a certain type of investment, they obviously know something at a level that we don't understand. And so when we're seeing Blackstone and these other hedge funds putting massive amounts of money towards single family or residential real estate, we understand that there's a demand for it somewhere. Now with that, you know, obviously that's part of why the competing prices are going all over the place and things like that. So as we watch that, that's one piece of it. We also need to look at the commercial real estate space. So the commercial real estate space right now, there's something going around where they're saying the office space is specifically going to crash. Now, the reason why is because all of the loans it's almost a quarter of all of the commercial real estate loans for office space are all coming due within the next 12 to 24 months. And so with that being the case, and all of the interest rates being sky high and vacancy also being at a sky high for office space because of the pandemic, we're thinking that a lot of these are going to go into foreclosure, so forth and so on. So there's going to need to either be a massive sale off or repurposing of these assets where they get converted over to something else. And right now, one of the topics is multifamily or residential space that it could be converted over to. So we're starting to see all of this trend in the residential space. What I am thinking is going to happen is we've also had the delay with all the pump of the extra money coming into the from the pandemic. Roughly about every 7 years, there's a real estate cycle, and we should have been from 2014 to about 2021 is when we should have saw it. We had that artificial inflation with the money getting dumped in during the pandemic. I'm thinking that around 24-ish, we're going to start to see that correction. That's when that office space is going to come in. Blackstone potentially can dump all of the assets at once, and then the residential space all over come, and then we're going to start to see that new flash sale. So it's a price point. Not saying it's not going to crash. I don't believe it's going to crash like 2008, but I think that's going to be the next buying period for most of us. When people are kind of, Warren Buffett always says, when others are greedy, be fearful. And when others are fearful, be greedy. And I think that'll be an opportunity for the tuned in investors to potentially be greedy and stack up a lot of deals.
I love it. On the notes side, I do state of the industry addresses as you do, and keynotes and such. And it's something I track. I enjoy looking at it, doing the research and that sort of thing, and making projections. And so many other people in my industry were just going, oh, everything's going to crash. It's going to be, it's going to be horrible. And we're going to have all these non-performing notes. So just sit with your cash on the sidelines. And I was telling my client base, no, all the evidence I see is that it's not heading down that road, at least not in the near future. This started last year, and I'm going,
right.
If you're sitting on the sideline, you're missing out on opportunities. You're out of the game waiting for something that, to your point too, nobody knows what the heck's going to ultimately happen here. So what, you've got to keep invested, but you keep your eyes ahead and just saying, okay, if I need to adjust, can I do that? So for example, one of the things on the note side we always look at is what's our relationship to our investment and what the property's worth. And if the property drops down 10%, am I still okay? If it drops down 20%, am I still okay? So there's various measures that you can utilize, and the people who just waited for one big event, they're trying to time the stock market. It's the same concept. It's like, you can't do it that way. You've got to have this plan, follow this plan, but keep your feelers out, keep your group. I think you said something like your I forget what you called it. It was a good terminology. Your community, keep your group, be associated with this. And again, I think we're going to have a lot of conversations about this again at the upcoming re-up meeting. Everybody, if you want to meet Michael up there, I've been talking, by the way, with Michael Glaspie, and you can find him at michaelglaspie.com. Also, check out his book on Amazon. He's got a best-selling book on there, Elite Investor, a militaristic approach to real estate investing. So check that out if you are in the Carolina area or want to be up there July 29th and 30th at the re-up. Go to the, there we go. Yeah, re-up meetup, REUP, meetup.com. And again, if you're looking for attending, put in the promo code NOTES, NOTES, and get 20% off on there. So to continue that on, with the future, your investments are staying as is and just kind of putting the feelers out. You haven't made any dramatic changes to any kind of a approach as of yet.
No, so I mean, I did, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I did sell off a good majority of my holdings earlier, but primarily because they were underperforming.
Yeah, that was for you. Yeah.
Right. And so I do have that capital. I put that capital in some more stable, they're not in the stock market. They're more of like bonds, things that are just going to go ahead and just ride the wave of this crash until I'm ready to liquidate. I haven't changed anything else. One of the biggest changes I've seen is the stabilization of the Airbnb market recently has made me get rid of all of my short terms and convert them back over to long terms. So that was one of the big adjustments I've made here. And for me, I look at all of our investment strategies just like a hedge fund manager would look at their asset or their portfolio. It's a matter of how conservative or how risk adverse are you? And what part of your holdings can you just move the allocation to, right? Don't make all these knee-jerk reactions where people are like, get out of here. And that's how people fail to grow when they're looking at their wealth. is because they're making knee-jerk reactions. They're not allowing time to do what it needs to do, or they're not trusting their own investment decisions. So beyond just the liquidation of partial, or I'm sorry, beyond the transfer of short-term back to long-term, I haven't done anything else primarily with my portfolio.
Mhm. When do you see somebody make a change? When do you, so you talk about business plan and setting that up and having that as a written plan. Doesn't mean that that's set in stone forever, obviously. When do you recommend that people start to change that business plan? Does it come back to your numbers and that the financial business side of it, or?
Yeah, so I always recommend it at a minimum a 6-month review every year or all the time. 6-month review, and maybe nothing's changed. That's fine, but at least review it so it brings it back top of mind for you. You can check your azimuth, make sure that, hey, everything's in line. Do I still agree with this? Because a lot of times when we start a company, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, whether it's a company or just an investment profile, whatever the case is, our goals may change every couple of months because life changes. Great example is you're a young man, and then all of a sudden now you're a married man and you have kids. Well, now your goals potentially can change, right? And so we have to look at that as a change because life changes. So a 6 months review, I always recommend. Doesn't mean that you have to change it. Now, as far as allocations go and budgeting and when are we changing the financial picture, I recommend doing that quarterly. I always recommend doing that quarterly because month over month is not just from one month to another is not enough. Quarterly, we got a little bit of data. And as we start to collect information quarterly, we also can start to test for seasonality, which is extremely important in any business. We need to know our highest sale months, our quarters. We need to know our highest operational expense timeframes. We need to know our highest vacancy timeframes, all of these things. And so adjusting quarterly is what I recommend.
And, you know, you're doing a business that ties directly into what you're saying right there, where, because I'm sure some people who are reaching a certain level in real estate go like, a quarterly review, that's 6 months. Who's got time to do that? And how important is that really? And I thought it was great. I've never seen anybody focus on that side of the business, but you have a program that helps people with that, right? You keep them accountable. Correct. And you come in and show them to do. And what I like about that too is you look at your own numbers, I think, a little differently than a third party, coming in and really look at those numbers, same numbers. It's just your interpretation is, but still, you're coming in going, hey, we've got an issue here. So tell us a little bit about that program and what you look at.
Yeah, absolutely. So just like you said, I come in as a fractional CFO, chief financial officer. I just call it, hey, I'm a business financial advisor. That's just basically what I do. And to your point, business owners will come in, your nose is to the grindstone. You're focused on the business, the operations, bringing in money. Oftentimes, your skill set lies in whatever it is your niche is. Real estate, notes, bakery, whatever the case is. When it comes to the finances, that's one of the first things that most business owners try to hand off, right? Whether it's third-party bookkeeping or through a CPA. And oftentimes people think that a CPA is the one that is going to give them guidance on their finances in a company, and that is not the case. A CPA is a tax professional. They're going to basically say, hey, this is what you did. Here's your tax penalty, or here's some of the things that we can do to reduce your tax obligation. That's what a CPA does. What a financial advisor or a chief financial officer does is we come in and now we're looking at the holistic view of the entire finance section of your company, including taking direct contact with the CPA and the bookkeeper. I can do those tax strategy calls with them. I can address the bookkeeper to say, hey, look, all of these accounts that you have, it doesn't make sense. This should actually be allocated here, so forth and so on. Then we look at what do the numbers actually say about the business, because just like you alluded to, a lot of times business owners are like, no, I'm doing well. I mean, I take out money every month. My family's fine. Sure, I'm doing great. And when in reality, they could be losing money the whole time, right? Because maybe they're commingling. Maybe they aren't doing something correctly. And one of the biggest things about owning a company is, regardless of what your intentions are, I think it is extremely important that you are always setting up your company for the possibility of selling it in the future. And when people hear that, they think, oh, sell it. That means I got to, I don't want to get rid of it. This is a legacy. That's fine. Mm-hmm. Selling it means if it's in a position to sell, that means you are no longer operating in the company and it is running by itself. And in order for that to happen, there's certain KPIs, there's certain performance metrics that need to come in place so we can actually hire those higher level individuals that can run this company for you. And by doing all of that on the financial side, there's 4 key departments. You got your marketing, your sales, your operations, and your finance for every company, right? And handling the finance side feeds into every single other one of them. On the finance side, I can tell you if your sales is doing a crap job. I can tell you if your operations is inefficient. I can tell you if your marketing is just a waste of your dollars, because I'm seeing everything on the back end. And so it's an extremely important division to have. And a lot of people put it as a backup. Oh, I'll get to it later. When in reality, this is kind of like that foundation that's going to allow you to scale comfortably and safely, over the years.
Yeah. So even if there's no intention to sell your business, to structure it that way still makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, most people that I talk to, I've never heard anybody say, I started a business so I can work harder and longer than I ever worked before. I haven't heard anybody say that, right? They want the idea of the lifestyle that comes with a business owner, right? For the most part. Now, there's different reasons, different motivations out there. But in order to really have that lifestyle, you have to have the systems and the people in place so you can actually do those things, right? With the attitude that you want to have while you're doing it, right? So it's important to build those systems and create it like you want to sell it.
Great. Yeah, great stuff. And I appreciate you coming on. I know we're at the end of our time here together, but everybody check out Michael. I think you'll be very impressed. You'll see a link to his website. Go check out his book on Amazon as well, Elite Investor, The Elite Investor, and doing some great stuff on the finance side. So if you're a bigger business and you want a fractional CFO, I thought that was just a great idea. To have somebody come in and do that kind of service. It's all outlined on his website. So thanks again for being on, Michael, and thank you everybody for listening. And I look forward to talking to you again just in the near future.